everybody, this is Talkie for the second deck tech on TalkieCasts. Today we'll be talking about Aggro Forest. This deck was very close to being tier 1 before the mini expansion, but a new card propulsed it into the limelight. Now, many people think it's the best deck to grind the ladder, as it is both cheap, strong, and really fast, which helps you grind games faster. So without further ado, let's jump into the deck list. What's very interesting with Aggro Forest Craft is that even though if you want to play it really aggressively it has a core of about 35 cards, it can very easily transition into a more mid-rangey build of Aggro Forest or completely mid-range. Today we'll be talking only about the Aggro version, so here you can see the core cards highlighted. The remaining slots can be filled with more removal, more finishers, depending on the meta and depending on what you think is best, because no consensus has really been reached yet. As opposed to Portalcraft, for example, the decklist is very flexible. You can really build this type of deck in many ways, and in the end, even though there are some synergies, every single card is kind of independent of the rest of the deck. The first key card in this type of Forestcraft deck is Rain. This card allows you to get on the board early and take control of the board. When coupled with other cheap removal like Urban Barrage or Insect Lord, it allows you to almost always be ahead on board after your first evolution. This card is really a centerpiece of all Forestcraft decks at the moment, and is for this reason played in Aggro Forestcraft. The other key card in Forestcraft is Wood of Brambles. In the Aggro versions of the deck, it's not only about killing the opposing creatures more easily, it's also about protecting your board. When you have a Wood of Brambles on the board, your opponent's X1s cannot kill your creatures, which means you can play more aggressively and force the game into a racing situation. Wood of Brambles can also be searched for with Starry Elf, which helps the consistency of the deck. Then, when we focus more specifically on the Aggro deck list, two more key cards jump to mind. The first is Hyperia. Even though it's a very simple card, the fact that you have it in your deck allows you to get into a racing situation that you know you can win. A turn 5 Hyperia on the play is very hard to answer for your opponents. The second card would be Elf Song. Elf Song rewards you for going wide, while providing you with a constant stream of fairies. It's a really crucial part of the deck, and it will bolster your aggressive draws. Then, let's move on to the role players of the deck. First, let's get into the curve fillers. Here you can see the 1-drops which help you be on the front foot from the start of the game, but also Fairy Whisperer, Torrid Falconer, a new card from the Dawnbreak Night Edge mini expansion that helps you curve out really easily. If you're on the play and you have a 1-drop and a Falconer, you know you will be curving out until turn 3 perfectly. Then, you have the removal. Everybody plays 3 Urban Barrage, but some people decide to skip Sylvan Justice. I really like Sylvan Justice, as it provides you with a fairy and helps you get control of the board without overextending. This is also where you can see Insect Lord, the only legendary in the deck, which help extend your board while removing the opposition. As we will see in a few seconds when we talk about the strategy of the deck, Insect Lord is also very important in what the deck is trying to achieve. Then, Starry Elf can tutor for Wood of Brambles, so it sort of acts as extra removal. Finally, let's move on to the finishers. Leafman can reward you for having many fairies on the board, and Fairy Driver is instrumental in closing out the games. Very often, your opponent will stabilize between 6 and 10 life, and you will be able to finish them out with Fairy Driver attacks. Another possible finisher, which is definitely a flex slot at the moment, is Beetle Warrior. Some lists play 0, some lists play 2, some lists play 3. It helps you by adding storm damage to your deck, but it also sort of increases the variance of your deck, as you really never want to be playing it without storm. So in the end, I personally prefer playing a little bit more removal over Beetle Warrior, but it's definitely a strong choice as an additional follower. Let's move on to the general strategy of the deck. Aggro Elf is all about getting on the board early, using that advantage to get cheap shots at the opponent's life total, and then finishing them off when they are between 6 and 8, or buffing your board to the point they cannot answer it. Once you're ahead on board early, you will be able to push the advantage with Rain, Insect Lord, or Removal, and you should usually have more followers than your opponent on the board by turn 3 or 4. This makes the deck really strong against Jolly deck like Spells Boost Witch, and in general, it's just strong against everybody as it has a very strong proactive plan. It's trying to do its own thing, and if you're not stopping it dead in its tracks, well, sometimes you're gonna lose to it. This means that Aggro Elf doesn't have really awful matchups, as even in the bad matchups, like mid-range Swordcraft, you can just go under them and sort of steal the game away from them. And the most problematic things will be very early board clear, like Force of the Dragon Ute, because this means you won't be able to get ahead on board in the first few turns. But in general, I would say it's a very consistent deck that doesn't really have bad matchups by virtue of being very proactive by forcing the opponent to answer your plays. Finally, let's talk a little bit about how the deck plays out. First, the Mulligans. You should be mulliganing to get a good curve. While it's important for most decks, it's vital for Aggro Forestcraft. If your turn 2 is Elf Song or Wood of Brambles, you will lose more than half the time. You need to have committed creatures to the board by the end of turn 2. You need those early creatures to be able to soften your opponent's life total before you finish them off with your finishers. Even though I listed Rain, Wood of Brambles, and Elf Song as key cards of the deck, you shouldn't be afraid to mulligan them, especially Elf Song and Wood of Brambles. A perfect hand would be something like Goblin, Storied Falconeer, and Insect Lord. There are also some matchup-specific considerations, like really wanting a Wood of Brambles against Portalcraft, but I would always advise you to shoot for a 1-drop and a 2-drop. Regarding in-game decision-makings, as all of your cards are pretty cheap, you will be presented with a lot of options in the first turns of the game. This is where all the important decision making will take place. When you play an aggro deck, the important decisions are condensed in the early game because your curve is so low and you have so many options. As a general rule of thumb, you should be prioritizing getting on the board. And also, when you have Wood of Brambles in play, don't hesitate to use that to go face. This deck is designed to create racing situations that it is equipped to win. So when your opponent kills one of your 1-1 with a 3-2, if you slam a Wood of Brambles, usually you should just leave them with their 3-1 and push damage through. Finally, this deck will reward you a lot if you play to your outs. This means you have to be thinking about what's left in your deck and how you will be winning the match. Don't throw away your fairies if your opponent is at 8. It's usually better to hope for a fairy driver top deck to be able to close out the game than commit 4 1-1s to the board. You really have to be conscious of how you will be able to win the game and pray. The games will come down to the wire. This game wins on thin margins, but it is strong and it is rewarding. So that's it for this Aggro Elf deck tech. If there's any other kind of stuff you would like to see in those videos, don't hesitate to ask for it in the comments. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you tomorrow for another Shadowverse video.